Hello, everybody, and hello from Ella, who needed some snuggles right before I was going to turn on the camera and everything. So, snuggles she will have. She's not very understanding kitty when it comes to the answer no. But then, very few kitties are, is my guess. Right? You guys aren't big on the no. It's not really your speed. So I see Green Users is here and Quindy, and it sounds like they heard me. So I think everything is working the way it's supposed to. I don't think I have everything in a good location, but that's a different problem. So I guess I'll just talk to you for a minute since she does not seem ready to put down. I don't think Zachariah is at his painting desk. Excellent. I don't think, hi, you're very distracting. I don't think that I told the story of my flat tire last week. Did I? Am I just going that senile and I can't remember that I told the story? I don't see anyone saying that I totally forget telling the story. So a couple weeks ago, we were kind of delayed on car service, but it was just the normal oil lube swap, rotate the tires deal. So I finally made the appointment, and I was driving over there, and I had my music on loud because when I'm in the car alone, I like to have my music on loud. And then I felt like I heard this noise, and I'm like, what? What's that? Is there like a plane flying overhead? What's happening? So I turned the music down, and I'm still hearing this noise, and I'm like, well, it doesn't seem like it's getting closer or further away. Like, what's happening? And I reached a stoplight just around that point, and as I'm slowing down, the noise starts changing, and then I can feel it, and I'm like, oh, the noise is me. The noise is my car. Clearly something has happened. Like I'm literally a mile from the service center at this point. I'm like, I'm pretty sure I blew out a tire. It's happened before. It was a different car. But that is my best guess. I hope that's all it is. So I put on, my hazard lights and I drive a little more slowly and I get to the service station. This is actually my favorite moment of this. So I drive up and they have like a little, I don't know, greeter person that finds out who your appointment is with and gets the ball rolling on everything. And her face as I'm driving up with the hazards on and the flat tire, which I hadn't seen yet, so I didn't know for sure. That's when, like, has part of my car fallen off? I don't know, but just her face, and I roll down the window. And I'm like, I'm actually here for scheduled service, despite appearances to the contrary. So she went and got the guy, and he looked at it, and he's like, well, let's try putting some air in it. Maybe it's just a nail or something, which has happened before. I was somewhere where they were doing some construction. I drove on a nail, and they were able to patch the tire up, no problem. But he starts putting the air in, and like nothing happens. And he looks closer, and he's like, oh yeah, there's like a giant piece of metal in your tire. I'm like, okay. So he's like, well, probably you want to get that fixed. And I'm like, yeah, if I can actually only get one thing done today because you're busy, let's make it the tire and I'll come back for the living. He's like, no, there's plenty of time. Don't worry about it. So I go sit down and I'm waiting because usually they come and they kind of tell you an estimate, or they're like, oh, this is also, your brake pads are getting a little low. Do you want to switch those out? Or, you could wait until the next appointment or whatever. So I'm waiting for him to come back. And trying to, remember how much the tires cost and stuff. So then he comes back and he's like, okay, so we got the tire, we can do the tire, we did the thing, but you also have these other problems, which was the oil pan was leaking. But was it the oil or the fuel? Because actually, now that I think about it, the problem we had before was the fuel pan. And there were some gaskets, like I don't know car stuff very well. And he's like, we don't have the parts for all of that, but we probably can get them by tomorrow, by the latest Friday. So we'll give you a loaner car and you can go home and we'll fix that and I'll call you when it's ready. So I'm like, okay. And like our car is not young. Our car is 18, 19 years old. And we bought it because of a flat tire, which is a different story. And you're still purring away happy, and I can't paint yet, huh? So, but so we've been talking about buying a new one, but my husband wants like a hybrid or an electric, and I feel like in a few years the technology's it's one of those things. The technology is galloping so fast that like, do you really want to do it now and then have your car be outdated? Like I've enjoyed the fact that we've had this car for 19 years. That's why I buy a thing and use it until the thing is done. I'm cool with that for stuff like cars, washing machines, things like that. I don't need the latest and greatest. In fact, so they gave me this new car and it was a Camry, I think. So last year's Camry, and I get in and like everything's electronic, and there's like 400 controls because my car is old enough that the dials are dials. I mean, like it has an electronic clock and radio and stuff, but most of it is dials and switches and things like that. And I'm like, I have no idea. So first I had to ask the lady, and they always get so, they think it's so weird when my first question is, okay, show me where the emergency brake is. And they're like, why? And I'm like, I live on a hill. You all want me engaging the emergency brake. Make sure I know where it is. So she showed me that. And then she said something about the key. And I was like, okay, I didn't quite hear her. So I get in, I figure out how to, change my seat a little, set up a few things, start driving, realize I didn't fix the mirrors. But I'm like, okay, well, I've got the rear view mirror. I'll fix the rest later. And then I get home and I turn the car off and I can't get the key out. And I'm like, I know that these new cars, some of them don't even have keys, and I don't know, they do all this stuff. Like, I know that stuff is there. I just don't know how it all works. So I'm trying. We're looking it up on the web. I had to look up something else, how to fix the mirrors, I think. So I fixed a few other things, figured out you could make the seat much more comfortable than it had been. And I'm like, what are we doing wrong with this key? And I just hadn't turned it like quite aggressively enough. But I didn't, it's not my car. I'm like, because they're all like, do you have good insurance? I'm like, well, yes, but I'd rather not use my good insurance. Destroy this nice loaner car that's like way fancier than my car. Because the nice part about having an old car is that my good insurance is very, very inexpensive at this point. So finally we figured it out, and I, managed to turn the car off and get the key out. I do like how the part of the key that pokes out, the hasp, I don't know, there's probably some name for it. Kind of, it's like a switchblade. It like goes inside the clicker part. I like that. So we ended up not needing to drive anywhere. I mean, I was happy to have a car because we do only have one car because we only have one driver. So I was happy that we had it in case something happened. But I was like, I'm gonna prefer not to drive the loaner car because that would be when I get a ding instead of driving my old very beaten up car. That would be when nothing happens other than this flat tire. But while I was sitting there waiting for them, I was kind of playing this game of like good luck, bad luck. Like, okay, is it good luck or bad luck that I, had a major tire blowout while I was on the way to scheduled service? And it's like, well, on the one hand, that was good luck. But on the other hand, if I had not been going there to that place at that time, I would not have driven over whatever the thing was. So, yeah, I still don't know what kind of dice roll that whole Zachariah says note to self, probably has a switchblade. I do not trust myself very much with knives or X-Actos or anything else. But, if you were going to have one, that is good. Because then, I mean, I've never really had a penknife because I will manage to cut myself taking the knife in or out. So a switchblade would actually probably be safer in some respects to me, not necessarily surrounding people. Hey, Valander. Katie says hello too. Hi, Katie. Are you ready to go down? You really don't look ready to go down. But when we drove the car back, my husband was like, well, let's just see if they have one of the ones that I'm most interested in on the lot, and we can take a look at it and you can sit down in it because I got all these back problems. And I really hated the Camry for that because it's one of these seats where your legs are like kind of straight in front of you, and my back is happier if I'm in more of it feels like a chair kind of car. So I got to test that at least, but I also really hated the headrest. And I think we said something about that to the sales guy. And he's like, yeah, that's actually a safety feature. And we make it so you can't like take it out and turn it around. It won't click in right. Because you'll get in trouble if you're in an accident. And they've found you to do that because it prevents whiplash. Which made me remember, because I'm having the neck pinch right now again, that I was in a car accident where... it was like, it was like a chair. The back only went up to about your shoulders, so there was like no head rest at all because it was in the back of my parents' van had this thing, and my stepfather very rarely put the chairs in, because he was usually using it for hauling stuff around. But for some reason he'd put them in, and it was like Christmas. We probably were going to some family meal or another, and we were coming back from that, and we got rear-ended. So I went, the classic forward and back whiplash deal, and I felt all right at first, but by a few hours after getting home, I was like, oh, everything's stiffening up, and everyone was like, yeah, you should probably get that looked at. So I went and, I mean, I got an insurance settlement and I got physical therapy and stuff, but, I don't really think about it that often, but I looked it up and they've done research, and the majority of people who've had whiplash 20 years later have more problems than people who did not. And so I'm kind of wondering if that's what some of the thing with my neck is. Yes, I have been demoted to co-host by a kitty, and she's just not talking very much. She's not holding up her end of the conversation or asking questions or anything. Not even looking at the camera. Look at the camera, baby. Everyone thinks you're super cute, because you are. She's actually very chatty, so it's funny that she's being quiet, because she's purring right now. But she will burble and meow, and sometimes there's yelling if you aren't getting your way, right? Or she'll just this is what happened while I was getting ready. So I'm walking around, I'm doing things, I'm getting things, and she's just following me the whole time. It's like, okay, so no is not an answer, because you've gone into full stalker mode, and you're gonna just continue doing this until I do the thing that you want me to do. Which isn't even the full thing that you want me to do, but it will pacify you, won't it? Yes, maybe. You haven't decided yet. Can I paint a mini? Let's try. Let's see how hard she played. Okay, I got bitten, so that's a no. She's getting to be a feisty old lady. But the first flat tire story, because I sort of wish that we had been closer to planning to buy a new car, because I would love to have been able to say every time I buy a new car, it's because I got a flat tire. But the first time we bought a new car really was that. So when I moved down to America, I didn't know how to drive. So I didn't learn to drive until about 20 years ago. And we got somebody's old beat up car for $1,000 or something when I first learned to drive, which is good, and I don't have to worry as much about getting a dent. But I was driving my husband someplace on a rainy day. He used to go to people's houses and help them with computer problems. And it was a similar thing. We're driving along, and I'm like, what's that weird noise? It's like, pa-chum, pa-chum, pa-chum. And we get home, and it's super flat tire. We'd driven through this big puddle that was actually a giant rut that you couldn't see that the road was as messed up as it was. Is this in the right spot? Because I put the water in after I set up the camera and switched to the other thing, like a smart person. So let's see. So since I've been having the neck thing, I decided I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to do the show. So I kind of left it till today to see how everything was feeling. And my thought was, well, why don't I finish up some of the miniatures that are so close to being finished? And, I like to talk about kind of problems or thoughts or things in our hobby that are not just the brush and the paint, kind of how our thinking relates to that. And I think a lot of people have a problem of not finishing the miniature. I don't think I'm the only person who get about 80% done sometimes, and then you just kind of stall out, or you get distracted by another one or something. So it's worth talking about getting stuff done, or deciding that you're not going to get it done. You've lost interest in this miniature, you leveled up enough that it seems pointless, but you put all that work in. So it's you want to do it, you don't want to do it. I've had a lot of miniatures like that. I went through them. I think I talked about that on a show not long ago, and got rid of a lot of them. Excuse me, now I'm dropping paint on the floor. But that's the nice thing about dropper bottles. But I just want to, kind of take... Yeah, Zachariah M. says, I have a fear of finishing minis subconscious. And I don't think that you're alone. I think sometimes what the thing is that's keeping you from finishing is different for different people. But I don't think you're alone in that at all. So I think one thing that happens is if it's done, then you kind of have to... Yeah, because then it can be judged. If it's done, you can't say, well, it's in progress, so, this isn't how it's going to look in the end. It is the end. As soon as you decide it's done, it is the end. And then you have to deal with, well, do I not like it? Did I not achieve the goal that I was trying to achieve? Are people, not responding well to it? You have to deal with all of that stuff once the done is done. So I think that is a big thing for some people. And what I think there is, first of all, there's a very positive feeling from finishing things, from accomplishing something, from being able to look at something and say, I did it. Even if you don't like it, like you got to clean out your fridge or mow the yard or whatever. Like, nobody's excited about those things as well. Okay, I'm sure there's someone somewhere who's excited about some of those things. But the majority of us are like, whatever, would really rather not have to do that thing. But there's often a sense of satisfaction once you do the thing. And it's similar with a miniature. Okay, so it wasn't a great miniature. A done miniature is still an accomplishment, even if it's not a finished miniature. I mean, even if it's not a great miniature. So I think it's worth finishing on that level. Another problem I think people have is that you will continuously go back and revise and go back and revise. And then you never have anything to see that you are making progress. Like, you need to finish something, put it away, do some new things, come back to it 6 months later, and then you can see that, oh, yes, I am improving. Because you can't always see it mini to mini, and sometimes a miniature is a step back, and it's not an improvement. But being able to look at, okay, here are the minis I've done in the last month, and then here are the minis I did a year ago. Usually you're going to see a difference. And sometimes maybe the difference is you did it faster. I mean, that's still good, right? I'm trying to, a lot of these guys have rocks, so I'm just trying to think about rocky grayness, I guess. I might make hers a little lighter. So I think it's valuable to finish on that front as well, so you can see that you have improved if you finish something. And it's harder to see if you just have partially finished things, because a finished thing, you perceive it differently too. Like, even, okay, so the figure's finished but the base isn't. The same thing with this, it's gonna look different. We're just gonna perceive it a little differently once it's actually finished and I painted the base rim. And there's just, you don't have to be overlooking or looking past anything at that point. Everything's the way it is. But even on the being judged front, or judging yourself, which is more likely to be the problem, really. Unless, I mean, Zachariah, I hope you don't know a bunch of people who are telling you that your minis are trash. Why are you doing this? Because that would be a shame. Maybe the correct answer is don't hang out with those people instead of don't finish the miniatures. But, like, use it as a growth opportunity. Like, okay, it didn't turn out great. It's like, I'll do that for the show all the time. In fact, most of these miniatures have problems. I have not fixed these problems on the way because I want to take it as an opportunity to, do it like, okay, if it looked like this, here's the critique, here's the things you could do to improve, then I can do the additional painting, and you get more of an apples to apples comparison. So I've deliberately left some, I didn't deliberately make the mistake on any of them, but when I noticed what was wrong with them, I didn't fix the mistake because it will give me an opportunity. And that's one reason I want to finish these, actually, is to start taking the opportunity to talk about critique and here's what would make things better, since we are leading up to ReaperCon, where people will be wondering just that, how can they make their miniatures better? And many other cons. There are, I didn't actually check, but I don't know if there are still class slots available at ReaperCon. I would guess that there are, and that it's possible there will be later editions. And people will, life will happen and they'll have to put their tickets back in the pool. So even if you didn't get what you want recently in the scrum, don't give up. And the same thing with Gen Con. I don't know if Gen Con has a waiting list system now or what, because it's been many years since I've attended. But I noticed they had quite a slate of classes. I do not know if Nova classes have gone on sale yet. I know they're ramping up for their convention as well. So one of you probably knows more about ReaperCon classes than like how many are left or how it went. Hopefully the technology was better this year. Actually, yeah, I should have gone Should have gone on the forums and Facebook and stuff, because I know we have a new site, and it seems like it's a little more intuitive for buying tickets and all that stuff. So I'm hoping that is true. Alas, since I don't really know exactly what my schedule is going to be, I just know my classes and kind of generally when things happen. I never really feel like I have enough time to try to take classes at ReaperCon anymore, which I miss. But alas, when they started doing the night classes, the first year they were doing, well, the first year they went back to doing them at night. Hey, Dr. Flocka Flame. Way back in the day, there were, back when it was back at the factory, there were a few years where we did night classes, because I did them. I'm used to like teaching night class. Well, not, evening. It's not like midnight or something. But when they started doing that again at the new convention location, I took a photography class. And it was kind of a very different approach to photography than I'd been doing previously, like some of the stuff with the lights and whatnot. So that was interesting. Like get big lights and put them further away, like big. He was kind of using sort of like, it was iPads or tablets. But they were lights, but if you think of that shape, and then you put it to either side of the miniature, but you put it further away than you would a smaller, more focused light. I have not done this, but I do think that it probably is easier to work with. I've got a little setup over, it's adjacent to here, you cannot see it from here, that I probably should refine. But the photography is one of those things that it's like a necessary evil to me. It's not the reason. It's not the reason I paint miniatures. It's like this thing I have to do that goes along with painting miniatures. But going back to the finishing things, I really do want to encourage you to do that. Like, don't think of it as, now everyone's going to see how much I suck, or I'm going to see how much I suck. Think of it as this is the opportunity to figure out how to get better. Because then you're going to take that thing and ask yourself, like, what do I wish I'd done differently? And that can be process as well as what the thing looks like. It doesn't just have to be about the results. It can be about the experience. It's like, oh, well, if I'd done this way, it would have been way faster. It can be something like that, or more efficient or something. I think you need some dirt as well as some stones. And I'm going to start dirt because it's all in there. Zachariah still sees a smattering of classes available in the list. So if you are still looking for stuff to do at ReaperCon, it looks like you can find some stuff. So think of something that's finished as an opportunity, not just an opportunity for you to grow and improve and enjoy more. Because that can be the other, what could I have done to make this more enjoyable? That's a valid question too. And I'll say this about imposter syndrome, like, well, imposter syndrome is a hard one, but it's kind of like people who do the thing that aren't imposters finish the thing. So finishing the thing is a good first start at feeling less like an imposter. The other thing I would say is fake it till you make it did work for me. When I first started to teach classes and do stuff like that, I was really nervous about the giving feedback part. Like, I was really nervous about the critiquing and the giving feedback. I'm like, I don't know if I know how to, make the assessment and then make the words to explain the assessment and all of this stuff. Sorry, I'm wrestling with which color brown I feel like goes with this guy for dirt. Like, I don't want super colorful dirt, but a little something. And I just, you also kind of, if I do it here now after years. I decided that no, I am going to be part of the point of calling this Beyond the Kit and doing the show and talking about stuff is to be honest. That sometimes, yeah, I totally feel like what I do sucks and I'm a failure and all of that stuff. But in general, if you're like running a commission paint service or teaching classes or whatever, you're not going to talk about that. Like, you're not going to talk about your self-doubts and self-criticism and stuff. Like, that's not great marketing, right? Like, who's going to want to take the advice or the class or buy the products of the person who is telling you how much they suck all the time, right? So that was the other kind of element of fake it till you make it for me, was just I'm gonna feel, it's completely legitimate to feel all those things. I'm gonna keep feeling whatever I feel. I'm just not gonna talk about it publicly as much until I was like, well, you know what, maybe it's good for people to know that lots of people feel stuff like that. So I talk about it here. But I guess basically I'm saying just do the thing. Just tell yourself doing the thing is better than not doing the thing. Like, you don't have to show anyone. You can finish stuff and not show anyone. You can avoid the judgment that way. And then, 3 months later, come back and look at it, and is it as awful as you thought? Often it won't be. Like, I think giving things time can really help your perception of them. This guy and his legs. It's not. Makes the base annoying to paint. I used to, back in the day, when Cool Mini or Not was a thing, some of you probably remember that, even if all of you don't, but it was kind of like this site where you would post a picture and people give it a ranking from 1 to 10. And they could comment on it if they so wished. They often did not comment, like, you would go in there hoping for commentary because you were trying to improve. And you might not get a ton of commentary. But a lot of people would still do the ranking thing. And, people would, like, have a lot of feelings about that. People, including most definitely myself. And then over time I realized, what helps? If I, like, sit on things for a little while and then I put up like 4 things at the same time, no one thing, it's like all my hopes and dreams and fears and self-doubts are not pinned on one of these. It's like a group of things, and if some of them get a better response or a worse response or whatever, it kind of spreads out the pain. I don't know. But also just waiting means you're less emotionally attached to that. Like, it's not your baby anymore, or it's not your new baby. It's grown up a little. It's gone off to school. Starting to have its own experiences. You're not quite as protective of it as when you just finish something. So I think that helps a lot. Is just sit on stuff for a while and then figure out if you are or are not happy with it, and then decide whether you're going to share it or not. Zacharias says, yeah, I don't think I suck. I just do a weird self-doubt and then I suck it up and just do it. And it has helped me to do the Reaper Store Paint Club and to remember and see my old stuff in the display cabinets. It reminds me that I'm a good painter. Yeah, when you're having a period where you're like really like, and we all have this, I think, where you're just like, why am I just terrible at this? Or, what happened? Why does no one like this thing that I think I did great on? Or any kind of thing like that. Those are the times to go dig up your old stuff out of the cabinet or wherever you put your older things, or look at old photographs even. And then compare and go, oh, okay. No, like, look at the googly eyes on those first guys I painted. Like, clearly I have improved. So sometimes we all need to do that. Duck a flock of flame. I'm usually unreasonably happy with the stuff I paint. Hey, I cannot complain about that. As long as you let other people have their feelings and you don't expect everyone to feel the exact same way, then you are probably better off than the vast majority of people. But that's one reason because I'm also talking about this because I'm still encouraging people to start working on your ReaperCon entries now. Don't wait. Don't wait for the last minute. And one of the reasons for doing that is that it gives you that time where the thing isn't just your baby, or you'll have like 4 or 5 things that you've done, or maybe you'll have like 10 or 15 things you've done, and you can pick the best 4 or 5 of those and bring them. Very indecisive about my browns today. Well, probably end every day would be correct because there's so many browns. Sakurai, the first eyes I painted looked so eternally terrified. It was awesome and hilarious. Yeah, I have this one like very surprised ranger. He is like, I don't know what he saw, but he has been emotionally scarred for life by his eyes. Just, that was like the second or third guy I painted. It's hilarious. Valander. Also, oddly, Simon was based on a vanity site called Am I Hot or Not and was just one of dozens of imitators. It is the only one still around, though greatly changed. Yeah, I wasn't sure if anyone remembered Hot or Not, because honestly, I was not familiar with it at the time. I ran into Simon long before I knew about Hot or Not. But, I mean, I guess it's almost like, now I can't, is it Tinder? Or which one do you like swipe right, swipe left? It was kind of like the original version of that. Like, you just looked at something and judged it and went on. But at the time, it grew into also being a great site where people gather to share information and stuff like that. But there were always kind of issues and things that worked and things that didn't work. But it was interesting. And it's still a good place to go. Like if you're painting something, especially an older Reaper meeting, I don't know how many people are still posting. I mean, people do still post, but I don't know how many people are posting newer stuff. But if you got something you're like, what's this thing on the belt? Is this like a pouch? Is this a book? Like what is this? Or, one of those situations where you're just like, ugh, what kind of color do people paint the skin on this creature? You can go to coolmeaningornot.com and do a search, and you can put in the manufacturer, the name of the miniature. You can narrow down the search any number of ways. And depending on the figure, you'll get to see other people's versions of it. You get some ideas. Or if you're kind of like, oh, I'm looking for a color scheme for noble, you could go on and type like noble king, prince, princess, or whatever, and see different people's takes on that. Maybe like a fairy queen or something. So it can be a nice way to get some ideas. Because sometimes you'll see what other people did, and you're not necessarily gonna, I'm not saying for like copying people, but sometimes it'll be like, oh, I'd want something like kind of like that, but more like this, or, oh, that gives me an idea for like something I could do totally different than that. So that's the benefit of that, I guess. But yes, so I thought I would take this opportunity to finish some stuff, and it's kind of, if you've got stuff that isn't meant to be like fantastic contest entries or whatever, just you're finishing things up for your game, and then you just kind of got distracted because you bought this new thing and it's super cool, and you'd rather paint the new thing, and then you end up with all this stuff on your shelf because we all have different reasons for why we kind of stall out at the 80%. Days when you're not feeling great, and that can be like you're just tired, like you don't have to make a lot of decisions and overcomplicate your life. Those can be nice days to just grab stuff like I've grabbed off my shelf and work on finishing it up. So, because that's kind of what, since I've got this neck thing, and I've been, oh, this looks like a brush that I did not clean well last time I used it. But luckily, I have this stuff. I have the bottom of it too. It just didn't come with it for some reason. And it will get it out later. So I'm not going to worry about that now. And I kind of want some texture on here. Why I grab this thing. Since it is meant to be like dirt. I don't know if it's still worth doing a wash on there, maybe. I have a cream color in there. I'm using the paints in the Learn to Paint Core Skills, Learn to Paint Level Up, and then each of those has an expansion kit. This forces me to have to mix and be creative on stream when I haven't, if I don't have a very decided color scheme that I want to do. Which is definitely the case with the earth and whatnot, because I didn't even think about that. And this guy has kind of like dead grasses and stuff. So I wonder if I really want more of a green. I'm going to give this another coat first. But yes, even, and there is this weird thing, like even when you get good, or whatever you want to call it, you can still have moments where you kind of, like you can have the cognitive dissonance of, I acknowledge that I am, better than, like I'm as good at this as a lot of people wish they were, but I can also still think that I suck at this at the same time. Because human brains are just wonderful at accomplishing things like that for some reason. Well, hello, other sad cat. I cannot address your concern. Please see the human next door. He is early. He would like his 4 o'clock dinner, and it is not 4 o'clock. But he's probably just so happy that it's not thundering anymore. It's raining today, and it seemed like it was just going to be like the sound of rain and not like a big thunderstorm. And then all of a sudden thunderstorms come out of nowhere. I was like, oh, sorry, little dude. So I made his little thunder cave. And hopefully he feels better about that. So I don't really have khaki green in this set. This is probably, I mean, this is a nice natural green, but I feel like I want this to look more like, dead grass kind of thing. So I could make stuff in here, but let's experiment with something fun. I got pure black and canary yellow. I'll test this one too, just to see. This is candlelight yellow. And actually we'll do this in the other direction, because when you have a color that is very strongly tinting, like it has a big effect when you put it into a mix, you should not start with that color. You start with the other colors and you add a little bit of that. So I'm going to start with pools of the yellow, because yellow is a much less powerful color than black. And there's actually a decent amount of real estate on that base, so I'm not going to be skimpy with the paint. And I don't do this a lot, so I do not know in advance which of these yellows is most likely to do this well. I've done this, I just haven't done it. What I really want probably is a yellow ochre, but this is what we have, so we'll see what happens. And these colors may be so pure that they don't go super dingy. But this is one of the, there aren't a lot of green pigments, and especially there weren't, in the the past with the old masters and stuff. So this is one of the ways they made green instead of mixing blue and yellow. A lot of blues were pretty expensive too. Is the other reason they probably didn't want to use blues. And I like to just test on a thing. I think it actually does need to be a little bit darker. And that might be too dark, but we'll see. And then if I don't think it's dead enough, probably is. But he's so like neutral in color, other than the blue eyes that and the mouth, that I don't want anything too colorful on the base, or you're gonna go look at the base instead of. That's why I didn't want to use like a regular green. If I put this green on it, that green is really gonna be like, look at me, because this is just gray. So I don't want the base, I want the base to be done, but I don't want it to be like the feature of the miniature. There may be times when you do, but I don't think this is one of those times. Hendarian, hello, and CM Bestie. I'm very envious of your skills. I've been min painting for 7 years and my stuff doesn't look this good. Well, I do have a few years on you because I think I've been doing it 18 years now. And I spent probably more time than a person should worrying about skills instead of just having fun and getting stuff done. So this is because this yellow is so pure. This isn't even that funky of a green in a way. That's actually pretty nice. Khaki green, but you won't get like emerald green mixing black into yellow, but you will get nice kind of khaki, natural, swampy type of greens. Yeah, that's still actually. So I think this is closer to a true neutral yellow, or not neutral, but pure yellow. Maybe just a little bit towards the green side, where this is very much an orangey yellow. So it's got like some red in it in a way, and that's why it's not mixing as clean a color. So when you don't want clean, bright colors, mixing some of the like complement in. So red is the complement of green, and there's essentially a little more red in here. So that's why I got a murkier result with that. I mean, then I did put a little bit of that brown in. So to be fair, let's put a little brown in here. And it's still like a greenier green than the other one. Which I do like it, but I don't know if it's the right answer for this guy. Lemon yellow. I'm using that on basically on all my NMM gold, says Sandarian. Yeah, you do want a nice true yellow somewhere in your NMM gold recipe. Not all of the way, but somewhere. So I like to have colors more like that, and then the highlight colors have more yellow in. So I didn't make these mixes too dark because I do just want to slap a wash on there and bring out all these nice textures, because there are more nice textures than I think is apparent in when it's just gray. And I really should mix it up a little bit on a base this size. So the other thing I'll do is kind of do like a patchwork thing when I'm painting, where I will have different versions of colors and patchwork them on in this stage, and then as you do the wash and all the other stuff, it'll start to unite it. I don't know that that is 100% the brown I would have chosen for this, but that's what's there. And because the paint is wet and then there's going to be a wash over it, it'll kind of merge together, and I'm not likely to see edges. I am seeing a lot of bubbles, which, if you've been here before, you know happens to me when I try to paint fast on something that's highly textured. The bubbles come. And this paint is very wet, so I'm just going to leave it and then do my bubble fix in a minute because I will have to take the mic off. It also helps that I'm using the same brush, so there's still a little bit of the green on there when I go get some brown and so on. That is also helping unite these colors. If this miniature had been more colorful, I would be trying to take some, like I'd mix maybe the dark color in the shadow and some of those browns. I'd be mixing some of those into the base if I were doing this on a miniature that was more colorful. But for those who weren't here previously when I painted the body of this miniature, you can go on Reaper's YouTube channel and watch the streams of that if you're very interested. I'm not sure why you would be, but anyway, my goal when I was painting this is I was kind of trying to paint something that looked like the owlbear in the D&D movie. I did not do the patterning yet, and since I'm probably gonna critique and edit this miniature, and I think it'll make it a lot harder to do some repainting on the fur and feathers if I have done the patterning. At first I forgot that, I did the stream and I was like, oh, I'm almost done. And then, as I was putting everything away, I'm like, oh, except for the part where this is supposed to be kind of looking like the D&D owlbear, and I did not paint any little stripes or dots or whatever that guy has on the figure. So, but then when I thought about it, I was like, I could also just paint the whole thing the green and then come and put brown over it, which maybe would be more efficient. So we'll try that. And when you have colors that have two coats, that require two coats, which is a lot of colors, this one might, because you can see where I got some of this dark claw color. So it might dry and we might see some underneath. I would just do like one coat that's solid and then over that start doing the patchwork idea. I just want to get a little more on here. Do some of the brown, because this is going to take a hot minute to dry since it's on the bones plastic, not on something that's been primed. And then also it's very rainy here, so we have a significant amount of humidity. I can feel the humidity. So that will not make it dry faster, I wouldn't think. I want to get around the claws a little more. Because I was talking about the other day, with when you pin a miniature on and you want to make sure that the feet look like they're firmly in the ground, sometimes you have to put some putty or some other kind of fill in to achieve that. You can also make the figure look more solid and integrated with the environment if there's a little bit of darker color around where the feet are, because there would be some shadows being cast by parts of the whether it's a robe or whatever is touching the base, that would be casting a little bit of shadow onto it. So using some darker color, even lining around areas like that, helps your figure look like it's sunk into the ground and gravity is having an effect on it and that kind of thing. And now I'll just do some of this slapping on of other colors. You know what, we can totally put some gray in there too. Although that's going to be mostly for the rocks. And now I'm going to pop all these bubbles because they will totally leave texture if I don't pop them. And you'll see little holes that look like pop bubbles, and that's not a great look if I'm trying to make it look like grass. But my secret is compressed air. So it's going to make a noise. I'm going to turn the camera off. I'm not depressing the trigger all the way. I'm just doing it real light. So I don't feel any coldness or anything when I do that. In fact, that wasn't even loud, so at least I don't think it was. Because this is wet paint, so if I really go with the trigger, like paint will totally go. You can also like kind of wait a little longer than I did. You can wait till the paint's not quite as wet if you want to make sure that you don't spatter paint all over the place. But all the bubbles are gone, and I didn't have to spend my time looking for bubbles and popping them. So that is one of my favorite hobby tools that isn't obvious, which I'm sure we all kind of have some hobby tools that, you know, people wouldn't think of when they're making lists of hobby tools. And that's one of mine. It's nice to dust miniatures as well, of course. So we'll just leave that to dry for a while. And then do a wash. This also needs a wash. I've got my little tiny palette. I don't know if I need to use that, or I could just probably do this on my wet palette, but just in case, so I don't make a total mess. Quindy has posted the link to the YouTube channel where all of these miniatures actually have been painted on stream over various episodes. Someday I'm hoping that I will put together like a spreadsheet that'll make it easier to find which miniature I worked on when. But this started out, I was experimenting with different ways to paint dark hair. This guy started out, I was painting for Valentine's Day. I was trying to do pinks that weren't pretty in a way. I mean, I did a pretty one too, but I also wanted to do not a pretty one. And this was after the D&D movie came out, and I thought it would be fun, and I was trying to encourage people to see it. Hopefully everyone's seen it now because it's out on streaming and everything. So it's not hard to see if you missed it in the theater. Which, as an old person, it feels to me like movies are in the theater for 5 minutes now. I don't know if that's just me, but I remember back in the day, like, you could take months to go see a movie. Like, word of mouth really worked well and stuff. But now, it's like, if you don't get in there in a couple of weeks, you just don't get to see that movie at the theater anymore. But then, I guess, on the other hand, you don't have to wait 1 million years to see it some other way. So there's good things and bad things. A bit of black, but I also put a bit of brown in there because I'm trying to keep it more natural gray. So I don't want it to be like super black and white gray. I want it to have a little bit of something else going on. This is blue liner, I think, which is not in any of the Learn to Paint kits, but I like it so much that I use it anyway. Yeah, Valerie says it's already on Paramount for over a month. Yeah, no, my husband was watching it as soon as it came back out there too. But we went to see it twice at the theater, so I'm good for a minute, I think. But I definitely will watch it again. But alas, I fear that it probably didn't get enough attention at the theater that I'm not sure they're going to make a sequel, which is too bad. Because I think it was pretty fun. It was certainly an improvement over the one from the 90s. That, yes, that happened. And I went to the show to see that one and everything. All right, so I tested the wash, and I didn't think it was dark enough. Because I didn't test it my usual way. Which I might not have known anyway. Sometimes you gotta try things in the environment. You know, since other colors have so much effect on how you perceive a color. You can't, you can think you got it right here. And then you put it on the figure with the other colors, and you're like, oh, that looks totally different than I expected. And this is gray, so I wouldn't really anticipate that happening, but I can still get fooled on value, which is lightness and darkness. And that is, value is tough for most people to see. Like, it's critically important, but we don't think it is. Like, we get really invested in the hue, like the blue and the yellow and the green. Like, does that part match? And we don't think about the value. And certainly for something like a wash, then we do start to think about it a little more, because it needs to be dark but not too dark. You know, like there's this kind of dance that you're doing when you're choosing wash or shading and then dry brush on highlight colors. But the lightness and darkness matters all the time. We just don't think about it all the time. So this guy also had rocks that I did not completely clean up, it would appear. Painted his rocks a little lighter, so we'll see if this color of wash works as well or not once it dries. And this guy is probably nowhere close to dry. Nope. I also need to paint this. Then the other reason my miniatures sometimes don't get completely finished is because I don't always notice what isn't done. Because yeah, I actually forgot about the little horns. So she needs the vest, the second vest. I'm not entirely sure what's going on with this outfit. Some pouches, the ridge of this, which I suspect is probably supposed to be metallic, and I didn't think about that at the time. Or metal. I painted this not metallic. And the belt. So this color, I think, is the same color that, or this object, this piece of clothing, the sleeves match this thing around the neck. Do I remember what colors I painted? No. But I can always adjust that part if I get it way wrong. So that's one of those things that I used to sweat a lot, and now I realize there are multiple ways to fix. And I think I'll just do like super dark blue for the little, like the belt and some of the leather parts. That looks like it is probably gunked up in the, yeah. So this is a thing that seems to happen a lot with nozzle type paint containers. There's some paint that got stuck in the neck and the top of the thing. And so that paint has not been with the rest of the paint. It also hasn't gotten shaken with the rest of the paint when I've been shaking it up. So when that happens, I like to get it, and you can see that it's kind of thicker and gooier, which is when it came out as kind of a blob. I'm familiar enough with this process now that that was my suspicion. It can also happen that you'll get watery looking paint, and this is the cause. Like, so the paint gets stuck up there, and then some of the medium separates out, and that gets in this part, and so it comes out watery. So sometimes thick paint or thin paint can be caused by the same root problem, weirdly enough. So I'm going to need to shake that again. I'm going to use my thing, so I'm just going to take the sound off for a second. Okay, so now, theoretically, it should be more fluid. I may need to add some water as well, but we'll see. I think that's a little better. I probably should add water, but I will wait and do that later. Bender. I love the possibly apocryphal origin of Thember Toad, the pudgy dragon. Supposedly an overweight cat jumped on the table during one of Gygax's games, knocking over minis, and on the spot he declared they were attacked by an overweight dragon. I hadn't heard that for Thember Toad. heard some stuff from, like, he was in some things, I think going back as far as third edition. As someone with a cat who, not these cats, they're not as bad, but when I was playing D&D in college, I had a cat who very much wanted to always be in the thick of things and getting the attention from the people and stuff. And I always kind of meant to make her into a monster that they had to deal with, which, you know, giving her snacks would probably have worked very well, but she would have had a breath weapon because this cat had some terrible breath. But I don't think I ever got around to doing it. She was a very sweet cat, but she did have some terrible breath. I think I painted part of a tentacle like a rock, but such is life. I can fix it later or not. I don't think anyone would notice unless they were doing what I'm doing now and kind of doing a rock head count. This is one of those minis that you kind of maybe wish you could paint apart and then paint onto the base. Because this is super fun. But I love Timber Toad. Timber Toad is like my other cat Corbin that none of you have seen because he's too heavy for me to pick up. Also, he hates getting picked up. So if he did wander in here and I tried to grab him and show you on camera, he would like yell and wiggle and run away. Which is very sad for him. Like, that he looks so cuddly and everybody wants to cuddle him, but that is not what he wants from life. He likes getting petted and stuff. He just doesn't like being picked up and cuddled. We think he probably has some arthritis in his spine because even when he was young and slim and stuff, he hated if you would pet like from about the ribs towards the tail, and it's like it hurts him. So we think he's very enthusiastic. We think probably slammed into a tree or something when he was hunting mice and gave himself a little bit of damage. Because he would, even after we brought him in, if we were playing with him, he would totally just throw himself into walls and stuff. When he was young, he doesn't do that as much now. But he'll like make you think he doesn't climb and jump very well. And it's totally lulling you into full sense of security. So you start leaving your hair ties out again. And then you realize that he really is stealing them. This is not necessarily a fictional example. Because he's always been super into my hair tie, like these things. They're kind of his best substitute prey. Like, he really wants to just be out murdering mice and things. But only so many will come in the house and let him do that. I think word finally got around not to go in our house. But then he started realizing that I would kind of put those away somewhere. Like, I had a little... it's like a little desk organizer, but it's got a drawer in it. And he figured out that I was putting them in the drawer, and he would open the drawer and get them out. And I didn't realize that immediately. But recently, I felt like he hadn't been going on my desk. So I gotten careless, and I was starting to leave them out around my computer desk again. And then, like yesterday, we heard this thunk. And I'm like, well, what's that? And we went out, and he was just walking around the hall. So it's like, all right, was that Corbin? And then I went in and I was looking at, he's got a collection of them and we have to pick them up when we vacuum. And I'm looking at them and I'm like, oh, those are all new colors. Hey, Raiders. Wow, the Hammer Girl is raiding with a party of 39. We've got Sierra Elven Blood and, saying hello. Hello to you all. I'm working on finishing up some figures. So it's, I painted the rest of these figures on various streams, but I was like, well, let's finally finish the base and some other little parts. I should be doing this part as well. Partly because I have a sore neck and I'm trying to take it easy on myself. Sarah Elvenbless says nice brain. Yeah, I actually looked up a Google image search pictures of brains, which only do that if you're ready for the results, because you can totally find Google images of brains. And then it was kind of wet and bloody, so I had to put some gloss and some red on there. All right, not dry yet. But I was going to work on her blue. Sorry, I haven't painted in a minute, so I'm trying to remember which. Ha! Sierra Ellen Blood said that's using your brain. Good one. So if you haven't been here before, I'm Rhonda Bender, Bird with a Brush, and I write the Learn to Paint kits for Reaper Miniatures. So this show is called Beyond the Kit because I wanted to have the opportunity to, there's only so much room in those little instructions, and that so much is very little. So this was an opportunity to kind of talk about things that I can't fit in there. But I don't only talk about like novice painting things. I try to mix it up and discuss a variety of different levels of techniques and different painting purposes. So sometimes I'm talking about more tabletop stuff. Sometimes I'm talking about more display type stuff. And I actually don't always paint a miniature to completion. These ones were just so close that I was like, I will feel so much more satisfied if they're done. And then I can use them. Because another thing I like to do on the show sometimes is take a miniature that I've painted and give you an example of the kind of critique you would get if you went to a painting contest like the MSP Open that's coming up at RuperCon. And then do some repainting based on the suggestions so that you can kind of see a before and after of what it would look like if you took critique suggestions into account. Because I know a lot of us don't want to repaint things that we've entered in contest. Either it's, one of the best things you've ever done, so you don't want to risk messing it up, or I like to just kind of keep it as a chronicle of that event and where I was in my paint learning process at that time. So I have done this on occasion with figures that I put in contests, but I started realizing if I get my like old D&D figures or things that I've painted on stream to demonstrate various things and I finish them up, they become a good source for examples like that. So I'm hoping to get some things finished up so that I can start doing that critique and repainting process on them. Since it is kind of convention and contest season, not just ReaperCon is coming up, but Gen Con and Nova Open and various other conventions in the US, but there's also stuff in other countries. I have a page up on, so the website up there is a blog that I write. Well, I haven't been writing it a lot lately, but the archive of information is still useful. And one of the pages that I did update recently is miniature contests at conventions and shows, I think is what I called it. And I went through and found as many different contest events for miniature painters as I could find and updated it with the dates and the web pages and all that stuff recently. So there are some in the UK, some in the EU, and a lot in the US. Unfortunately, I don't have anything yet for Australia or Africa, South America, or Asia. I don't think I have anything for great swaths of the world, I'm hoping. But if you know of any events that I haven't put up there, and even like smaller regional events, I'm cool with that too. If you just give me some information, I will be happy to add that to the database. And there's also links to something called the IPMS, which is the International Plastic Modeler Society. And while their focus is kind of kits like cars and planes and stuff like that, their contest events absolutely have categories that are for figures and busts and sci-fi, fantasy, dioramas. They have categories for all of that in their contests. And I had a lot of fun at the one I went to, and they're all over the world. And not always like the biggest cities and stuff, at least in America. When I was looking at the database, the clubs are not always in, I mean, like where I live is not the biggest city in my state. I mean, it's one of the top 3, but it's not the big deal one, and yet it has one of these clubs and the events and stuff. So it is worth looking into that, because there may be other people in the club who are more into figures, and then you can find some friends and fellow enthusiasts as well. Or you can just go to like the contest thing. That is cool too. That is what I did. All right, what am I looking for? What an excellent question. Well, I guess I'll circle back to whatever that is. Sorry, sometimes it is challenging to talk and paint at the same time. And by sometimes, I mean all of the time. Valander, I just made a bad pun. Client wanted a post-apocalypse figure at least somewhat based on Tina Turner from Thunderdome, so I named the turnaround render Tina Turnaround. Quindy sharing lots of links. So if you're new to the Reaper streams, you can, there's several different shows here. Every morning, Ann Forster, the person who developed the Reaper MSP paint line, paints, well, by every day I mean weekdays. I don't think there are any shows on the weekend as yet, because people like Quindy need to relax. But so every morning at, I'm going to say 11:30 Central Time, which is Reaper time, so all the shows are kind of listed in that time. I'm personally at Eastern Time, so this is why I don't always know what I'm saying. So she does that from like, I think it's an hour and a half, starting at 11:30. And then I do a show on Monday afternoons. Luca, an Italian painter, does a show on Wednesday afternoons. I'm going to say he starts at 1:30 p.m. I start at 2 Texas time. I start at 3 my time. And then Josh Foreman does the Crafty Creative on Thursday afternoons, and that can include sculpting and terrain and just all kinds of creative stuff. It is a well-named show. Thursday evenings, I think it's every other Thursday right now, isn't it, Quindy? They're not doing Reaper Live every week, they're doing it every other week. Is a show called Reaper Live, and that is the people at the company Reaper give updates on the products that are coming out and ReaperCon and other cool stuff like that. And you can win prizes there. And then Friday afternoons, starting at, oh goodness, I will be totally guessing if I say something here. So I'm just going to say there's a little calendar somewhere that will be more accurate, but that is Reaper Land, and that's like a community-based show with so it's hosted by one of the Reaper people, but they look at community minis and jokes and just generally have fun and chat and all kinds of good stuff. So there are a couple other shows that are more like the phases of the moon in that they are not scheduled super symmetrically. I don't know. But Erin Lovejoy does a show focused on using the Reaper Vex airbrush. Erin is like a master airbrush artist. On periodic Fridays at 8 p.m. Well, actually, I'm not even sure if it's at 8 p.m. It's like when he's ready, I think. And then Michael Proctor, the Clever Crow, and Jason Wiebe, who is an amazing sculptor, do the Crow's Nest show, which is supposed to be Monday after my show now, I think. It used to be on at a different time, but it's if they're doing it today, Quinn, you tell me so I can make sure that I finish up promptly. But I suspect that they have both been swamped by real life things. Since Michael, in particular, unlike a lot of us deadbeat painters, has a real job, where he has to be like a responsible adult and all that stuff. It is on hiatus until further notice. So I do need to talk to Michael about, we usually do a show about the MSP Open and like answer questions and stuff like that in lead up to ReaperCon. So I need to talk to Michael or Ron and see if they want to do that on one of the other things. Well, I got this brown, so let's just use this brown. It's neutral enough that I don't think it will conflict. I think it actually uses some of the colors that are in her skin tone and hair, so it should match all right. And I'll go ahead and just put the same thing on this pouch, I think. I was gonna paint one of them blue, but I'm now disinclined to do that. I want to keep the more saturated colors up by her face. Oops, sorry if I just jostled the camera. Even though I have a new camera holder where I'm supposed to do that less, apparently it only works so well. Oh, that blue has to dry. So I'm going to go back to the base, which is not completely dry, but I'm going to choose not to dry brush it for that reason. If I was going to dry brush, I would want to make sure that that wash was like 100% completely dry. Actually, let's check on this guy, because he was also drying and may need an additional coat on some places, but I think it's fine. I think we can go to a wash. And I think if I use this wash, it would like gray this out way too much. So I want the grass to look like kind of dead, but not 100% completely dead. So what color do I want to convey that idea? That is probably too much paint, since I will have to have water. I'm going to add some of my original green. So there's still just a little bit of a greeniness. And now I think I will do my usual wash test. I'm not sure that's dark enough, but let's do the test and see what it looks like. So my wash test is I just get a piece of paper with some text on it, and I do that, and I want it to clearly deposit color, but I also still want to be able to see some of the text underneath. So the whole thing with comparing milk or paint to milk and cream and skim milk and stuff is, I do not paint with those things, so it did not work for me. I had to come up with a different method. Just do a little spot test. Yeah, I don't think that is dark enough. So I got the transparency level right, but not the light dark part. So we'll just put some more black in there. Daka Flocka Flame, the milk comparison never worked well for me either. Yeah, I know, it's not even just miniature painting where I've seen that. They talk about in watercolor. There's like milk tea, butter or something. I'm like, I don't know. Makes a little more sense there, but only a little. Actually, I want a bigger brush for this. So hopefully this is dark enough. Because keeping this base a little on the darker side will help accentuate the lighter color of the owlbear as well. So if I make the base like a very light value, the owlbear will look like it won't look as white as if the base is darker. So sometimes you want to kind of think about stuff like that. I know we all like to have, you know, this is the color I paint stone, this is the color I paint grass or whatever. And that can be very convenient when you're trying to get minis on the table quickly. But if you're trying to paint to a particular purpose, or for something where you're putting a little more attention into it, like a contest entry or a gift for somebody, customizing those choices to the color scheme on the figure and what you're trying to achieve with the figure will get you a better result than just, this is the color I always use for NMM, stone, whatever. So I mean, I totally have recipes, but I have a lot of figures where I mix it up too. Or I might start with my recipe and then customize it a little to the specific figure. And I'm going to try just putting the wash on the rocks because of that, that idea of there being a little shadow around where things are resting in the ground. I don't think it will look weird with the previous wash, even if it spreads out a little. That's probably a twig more than a rock, but perhaps later I'll make it a twig. Then I'm just checking. I'm kind of notorious for missing little spots, and it's hard to go back with a wash and not get like a weird streaky look. So I want to double check that I didn't do that. I find that milk doesn't cover well. Bane of my life, that one, especially in the age of the internet where you can just show what it looks like. Well, to be fair, when people started talking about that, it was a lot harder to show what things look like. So we didn't really have any video when people first started making the comparisons to milk. And picture quality was such that it might not give you enough detail to get stuff like that. To get, fine examination of textures and whatnot. Paint. Fluidity. And even I had trouble. Like I had to get creative coming up with some of the pictures in the Learn to Paint kits to show, what it looks like unloading a dry brush, getting a dry brush ready to paint with the correct load of paint. There were a couple other things like that where I kind of had to, and then it was hard because once I came up with how I wanted to do it, sometimes I had to hold something and try to take a picture, and I didn't have another person, so I had to figure out how to operate the camera with one hand and do whatever, hold the brush. Like maybe I had the brush held with blue tack or something, or I'm like this, and then trying to take the picture on the side. So if any of the pictures look weird, that would be why. Because I am not as ambidextrous as I would like to be. Even then, showing what it looks like doesn't mean much because the right consistency can change based on the paint color, the paint brand, and even how you want the wash or glaze to behave. The problem is we're using consistency to mean two different things, and we aren't always making the distinction between those things. When you're talking about a wash or a glaze, you're talking about transparency. It doesn't matter if the paint is thick or gloppy. If you can see through it, it is the correct transparency for the task that you're trying to do. When you're talking about consistency, that to me is really only important in terms of I don't want to add texture to the miniature. So I need to check that the paint is fluid enough that I'm not adding texture to the miniature. And then there are other occasions where people sometimes do use like thick tube paint, artist white, to add texture to highlights, because that's a technique you can use to make something appear closer and more three-dimensional, is by making the highlights literally thicker than the surrounding area, and then the shadows should be, very thin and transparent. The oil class that I was taking recently, the instructor was like super into that. We would, at several steps, build up like thick highlights and go over them over and over again with white paint, like really thick gloppy white paint, to build those up and then worry about the color later almost. Which works, but if you didn't get everything exactly where it should be, then you've got thick goopy stuff where maybe you shouldn't have thick goopy stuff, because my drawing skills are not perfect yet. But I had a little space on the canvas where I wanted to change something, and I just scraped the thick white off and started over. But yeah, consistency and transparency are two totally different things. If you are using the same paints, like you regularly use the same paints and you're used to that brand and so on, you get to the point where you can kind of judge the transparency with the consistency if you're used to adding water or whatever other specific thing. So when I use this kind of palette, which I often do, I can tell on the palette, like I didn't need to do that test. I needed to just mix this and let it fall down a little, and then how much of this white is showing through tells me how transparent it is. Or I can even sometimes move it around like that. Because I always use the same brand of paint. And it's easier to get familiar with that. Not that nothing ever changes, because like the color makes a difference too. Some colors are just way more opaque than others. And they can seem fine in the little tests, and then you put it on the miniature, and you're like, well, that looks pretty streaky and awful. But you'll get like little tests like that work most of the time. But for the sake of people who are using different brands of paint, or that I was not physically near to show them my palette, because when I do classes, I used to go around the room and show my palette and stuff, I eventually was like, if I had text on paper, would that work? Because I do always test my glazes, so I don't always test the washes like I just did now. I do always test my glazes, and I had some old invoice that I had gotten out of a box, and I realized, like, oh yeah, like, okay, so I do this test for glazes. Could I make it work for other things? And then I figured out how to do that, and I'm like, okay, that's going to be my new way of explaining that, since you can do it at a distance, and it doesn't matter what consistency paint you use. If you like more of the gel consistency paints, that is cool. Or if I'd used, you know, I used water, but I could have used this, which is medium, or some other medium. And this would be much less runny, but it would be just as transparent. So it still worked great for a wash. Well, I'm bummed that I got some blue on there, but because I mixed this pink. So this will be fun. I'll have to do some touch-ups. We'll see if I can mix. I might not make you guys bear with the torture of watching me attempt to mix that color again. I'll probably go back and watch the stream and see what I did the first time. I do, for my own purposes, sometimes, well, often, write stuff down. Just so that if I need to go back and make repairs, or I really love the color, I have a starting point for coming back to it. I don't think this is enough blue liner for here. And let's make these ties darker so that they're easier to see as well. So I'm holding it away from my eyes so that I can see what it looks like at a distance. So I'm trying to judge whether I got enough contrast on these little things. So they don't need a ton because they're not the center of attention, but they need enough to kind of understand what they are as objects. And then putting on the last little details also helps. Because Bobby actually sculpted little tiny ties on there. So I want to mix stuff into my blue liner instead of making everything the same kind of blue. That is my favorite of the Henchman women, says Daka Flocka Flame. My paint job is looking great, especially the scale armor. Thank you. I think I want to touch up the other NMM a little, but I'm pretty happy with the scales. Well, by touch up, I mean like make some value changes to it. I think in the end it didn't doesn't have quite as much shine as it needs to have. So I'm just making some blue gray essentially. For these little leather bits, I don't think they should be as bright blue as, or as intense a blue as her clothing. For various reasons. And I'll just make this the same thing. Sometimes efficiency is the right answer. It also ends up unifying a miniature to repeat colors. So I'll call that done. And go back to her blue vesty top thing. I'm not sure if it needs a little more shadow too, but I don't want it to be too dark actually. Alright, this seems like it could be. All my blues are acting up. Oh yeah, that's definitely got the goopy nozzle thing. I'm not going to fix that right now. I'll fix it later because you already watched me fix it once today. But I would poke that down into the main body if you weren't here earlier when I did the other one. And shake that paint again and then check the consistency. It may need a little water added, or it may just be that once the part that got stuck in the neck that's evaporating more quickly gets mixed in with the rest of the paint, that will kind of take care of the problem. keep the case that these are in sideways, so maybe that's what's making it happen. I don't know. It just seems to happen. Like, honestly, I've tried a few things to minimize that, and I have yet to achieve complete success. Like, I've tried before I put a paint away, I'll pop down in the cap and try and, you know, create air in the nozzle so that it's not filling up. And I think it helps, but I don't think it like 100% avoids the problem. It just happens. It's something. It's one reason to go through all your paints every now and then and check them. Because if you leave that long enough, it will start to like completely dry out and get super gunky and cause problems. And then, because the volume of paint is then splitting too, so both sides can start evaporating faster eventually. So it's non-optimal. And is one of the main things that I check for when I'm doing my paint minutes. Which is, even though it feels like I just did it, is probably past time. It's a very good argument for not having as many paints as I have. But then I would not have all the colors, so I have no secrets to share in terms of anything that I'm painting for ReaperCon. But I may have been consulted on colors we might see at ReaperCon. And those will be, I imagine, available after. Those are one of the things I think that are almost always available on the web after, on the web store after for individual purchase. So you don't have to feel bad about missing those. You can usually get most of the miniatures. Sometimes there'll be like a special edition resin miniature or something that you can't get online because there aren't enough, or there will be a few online, but it won't be very many. But all the main paints and miniatures that come out at ReaperCon are made available to people who weren't there, or who were there and want more, I guess. So there's one of the things I suggested that I'm crossing my fingers they're gonna be able to do or choose to do. I'm definitely not the final say on any of that kind of thing. I just offer suggestions. But I think people will like it. So I probably did not add enough water to that, and it's being a little streaky in layers, which again is not because it's thick, it's because it's not transparent. So consistency, we kind of conflate the term to mean two different things, but the majority of time we're actually talking about transparency. Opacity, not how literally thick is it. Because the only thing that needs to be thick here is the miniature itself, because she is thick and awesome. But I can just take the like slightly darker version of that color and blend in the where the edges aren't so great. At least I can think I'm doing that. If I look at it later, I'll probably be like, ah. But I can think I'm doing that. I may need to go just a little lighter. That is near her face. I want some more popping. Then on those little unimportant pouches, I have this paint here, so we'll just see what it does. It's making it a little green, but that's not necessarily terrible. Since green is the color complement of this pink, in a way it will make it pop from a different kind of contrast. So I'll have complementary contrast as well as value contrast. Why don't I paint the ties as well? So these are more opaque colors, and that's why I'm having more problems with the streakiness. This blue is kind of, it's not transparent, but it's not a super opaque color, so it makes it easier to do layering with, essentially. I think I'm happy with that. Come back here to this pouch and get these little ties a little bit brighter. And let me just check where I am time-wise, because Quindy will get concerned that I'm getting distracted again. Not letting her go to the bathroom. All right, I'm gonna hope that this guy is dry, and he's not, because since I mixed those, it's not like it'd be super hard to mix again, but it's just more convenient if I can finish up with that now. But since it is not ready, I will go back to the base here. Actually, I want a longer bristle brush. Just checking how much paint I have in there. I don't want to have too much paint, because I definitely want anything I do here to just be on the surface more. It's like a little light maybe. No, I think it's working out as it dries. I might come back with the middle color. I'm not going to get too crazy with this base at this point. These are the cobblestones or flagstones or whatever that are my less favorite style. They are hard to make look cool, even if you do want to spend a bunch of time on it. For me, anyway. I mean, different people have different things they find challenging. Like, I know a lot of people who love to paint the color blue, and I find it tougher to get looking smooth and stuff than some other colors. So I think that's everything on her except the little NMM accessories, which I had painted with true neutral gray, if I recall, so I can't just, Quindy says my poor brother, I can't just cannibalize my other colors. Well, actually, let me check on this guy's rocks, because he had rocks too. Oh my goodness, it's so annoying to reach in there, and you guys probably can't see anything anyway. I think it's virtually impossible to do this, not only in a way that you can see, but I can see on a camera. Luckily, the main body was fine for seeing. So I'm using this gray color, this taupe beige cream. Let's call it cream. And I'm okay with that. I don't, like, as I frequently ranted, I guess, I don't think rocks should be pure neutrals, so I don't have to get white. to highlight those. If I'd been painting this kind of more organically, I might have tried to find a light color that I used elsewhere on the guy and use that for highlighting. I often use lighter skin tones to highlight rocks and grass and stuff, like mix in to highlight rocks and grass. So that way I'm like working colors that I used elsewhere on the figure into the base. I think that's very helpful. Like this base, it almost should have like some dark red in it somewhere probably. Or that color that I was using in the shadows on the tentacles, a reddish purple. That would help tie things together. But do I know offhand what that color was? No. I should, because it was a cool color actually, now I'm thinking about it. But... So I can see that my wash actually, I should have been a little more careful, I think. Oh, no, maybe that is the original black. Anyway, let's get some grass going on this guy. What brush do I want to use? We'll just go with this one. So there might be a big value jump here, but we'll find out. So even though I am just going to use the same color to highlight, and if I were really being persnickety for a contest entry, I might do some of those, you know, when I was doing the patchwork application of the original color, I might try to do some of the highlighting with something that more closely matches the patchwork color. But this helps unite it, especially if I was more adventurous than this, which I have been with rock, like where I've gone in. I'm putting oranges and blues and stuff like that from the figure. Then if I go back to using, you know, just grays in the washes and the highlighting, it helps kind of tone those down, but you're still getting some of the effect of adding a little visual variety. Visual variety is good, especially like this is a larger amount of base. The larger something is, the more you want to add some visual variety. Where this, if I don't do it on these rocks, that's pretty tiny. Now my cat is demanding attention, says Zachariah. Well, that is what the cats do, right? Especially if you start getting into something. Like you're doing something, you finally got off your butt, and you're like, all right, I'm going to go do this thing. And then the cat's like, excuse me, I need all of your attention to take care of my needs right now. And you're like, dang it, why didn't you talk to me 10 minutes ago when I was just wasting time? So weirdly, while I've been resting my neck, I ended up I wasn't sure I was going to get Diablo at first, because it's like so much with the Grim. Like, but it actually is like so much with the Grim that it's almost, I don't know if funny is the right word. Like it just, in a way, it's not laughable. I mean, they are serious and stuff. It's because, like, you know, 3 verged on laughable at times, I think. But it doesn't get me down for some reason, because it's just like they lean so far in that it's like, all right, whatever. But they lean so far in that I made a necromancer, which is not normally a character type that I like. But the druid doesn't have minions the way I would want to have minions. And I'm like, well, the necromancer does, so I guess maybe I'll do that. And it just cracks me up that even though I was like, fine, I'm just going to make her super goth. Way more goth than I could have ever dreamt in being in high school. And she's like the happiest person in the room a lot of the time. It's like, you know, come join my skeleton dance party and cheer up. Quindy is paying a necromancer to love my skeleton besties. Yes, they were awesome. They're just like a plague that rolls over the land. Zachariah's cat just needed a little bit of attention. Well, that's nice for Kitty to cut you a break. They don't do that a lot. You gotta enjoy it on those rare moments where they're like, I can't make you work this hard all of the time, human servant. Oh, maybe I wanted an even more yellowy color than that. But for reasons, I don't want to spend too much time on this piece. I do want to paint the rocks, at least a little. As soon as I remember where all of the rocks are. So last week, I normally start the show with, like previously on this stream. Previously on the stream, I was doing making bases. So none of them are here. But I made some bases. I talked about like pastes and putties and tea and other things that you can use to make bases. I'm not making it up. I really use tea on bases. And what I didn't say then, if you were here last week, and because a couple of you liked the tea idea, I think I use different ones. Like I have a lot of tea, and that is a massive understatement. So I'll look at some of the different herbal ones and other mixes. And then I had a friend. He went to South America on a trip, and he came back, and he was drinking some kind of tea where he'd just like leave it in the container and add new water all day. But I got some of those leaves, and they were like totally different than other leaves that I had. So I get a variety pack of these leaves. And let's see, Quindy can survive while I paint the base edges black, even though this one isn't 100% done because of the little NMM bit. Well, this part isn't totally little. So we may be making return engagement, but I cannot see how I can mess up the base rim painting NMM. I mean, I probably can because I'm very talented that way, but we're going to assume that I cannot. Zachariah M. It's either the windows upstairs, open the blinds, or a refresh on one or all of the water bowls, or some other thing she wants brought to my attention. If you're lucky, she communicates which of those things will, because the little cat that you saw at the beginning is an adorable, sweet little cat. I mean, mostly. She's a little bit less sweet now that she's an old lady, but she earned it. I'm okay with it. But she is like super bad at communicating. So she'll come around and she clearly wants something. Like she's meowing and looking pitiful and doing the whole thing. But then when you get up, she doesn't necessarily take you to the thing. Like she may just wander around, or like you just have to guess sometimes. It's like, do you want love? Do you want water? Do you want food? Do you want me to open this door or close this door? She will sometimes take you to things. Sometimes she'll take you to the thing and then she'll go past it. So you gotta be like, okay, there are like 3 things in this area that you could be asking for. I guess we'll just run through the list and see which one makes you happy. So I don't know how she didn't get that thing that most cats get, where they're like, I will grab your attention and then I will walk you over to the thing that you need to work on. She just missed one of those steps. She's not the smartest cat going. But that is okay because, is being smart important for her job of being adorable? No. As an example of her not smartness, she sometimes licks windowsills, among other things. I mean, windowsills, chair backs. She like grooms everything. It's like, little dude. Except the other cat. She's never groomed the other cat. He grooms her, which is crazy because she grooms everything except the other cat when he grooms her. It's like, Okay, you know what? This guy needs your assistance. He can't get the back of his head. But nope, you're going to go lick a windowsill. Okay. Daka Flocka Flame. Most of my tea looks kind of boring when I cut the bags open, kind of like caraway seeds. That's still useful. That's good for like that forest detritus. But if you have a friend that drinks like herbal tea or other kinds of teas, you get them to save some of their tea bags for you, because they may have some more interesting shapes of things. Or if you know people who drink loose leaf tea, because loose leaf tea, often the leaves aren't cut as small. So I don't drink it as much now, but I was drinking a lot of loose leaf tea for a while. So some of those maybe. One of them isn't. One of them is caramel vanilla, like Lipton, like it's a grocery store tea even. And it smells delicious. Eventually the smell fades from the thing. But I steep the bags first and then I let it dry out, just so that if a little, like if I am painting, you know, dry brushing or doing a wash on whatever the ground cover is, that I'm not going to release like a lot of that dark tea color. I want most of that to already be out if I happen to get some water on the thing that I'm putting the tea on. Also, why waste delicious tea? And I've seen people use, like, you can get spice things that where it does look more like cut up leaves, like oregano or something, where they haven't chopped it up super fine. It's more like a coarse chop. I don't, because it's that same thing where I feel like if I got water on it, it might release color or has too much smell left in it still. I'm not as thrilled about using that. But I know other people have. And if it doesn't worry you, because you know, I have no evidence that there is a problem or a reason not to do that. I'm just being overly cautious, I'm sure. This one doesn't have a rim, so there's no rim painting there. So let's see. I didn't get quite... I actually thought I'd be able to finish all of it because still haven't painted the band and the whatever I decide to do with that. And there's still some M&M. But I did last... My neck lasted the whole show, so that's good. Daka Flocka Flame has been wanting to try loose leaf tea. Yeah, you want one of the... So the old style tea balls or tea strainers are like flat metal with little holes in them, but they make a mesh now, and the mesh is really fine, and it gets out almost all the little pieces and stuff. So get that kind of tea ball or tea strainer, and you may, I mean, once you start trying some of the fancier ones, you may find it's surprising how much richer or more complex the flavor is or whatever. I guess tea was I didn't get into wine. I didn't get into, you know, whiskey or coffee or beer or any of those things. Tea was kind of my snobby adult drink thing. It's that part of being an adult. At some stage, you're like, I'm gonna pick some beverage and get weird about it. Maybe that's one of the markers of becoming an adult. I don't know. So anyway, I hope that wasn't completely boring or rambling. You didn't get to see my kitty and hear about one of my flat tires. You didn't get to hear about the first flat tire. I didn't finish that story, but maybe another time. So I'm happy that my back lasted the whole time. So what the problem is, and I'm mentioning this just because we are a group of people who are more likely to suffer this, although anybody is really. So tech neck, if you look at it. So we're doing this, you're bending down like that, which is very similar to the way a lot of us paint. You're bending your neck and rounding your back. Eventually your vertebrae get cheesed off about that, and they can pinch a nerve. So part of it's learning better posture, but there's also like exercise you can do. Like if you do chin tucks, that like pushes things back a little, and I can feel the nerve releasing when I do them. Valander is asking if anyone else twitches when someone says chai tea. I don't really, because English is not as specific about tea as other languages. So I just say herbal tea, where in French it's thé and tisane. So you immediately know whether someone is talking about something made with the tea leaf from the, the actual tea plant. But we call a lot of things tea. Any leaves we throw in water and steep, we call it tea. So I don't mind. And also that's just how English works. We steal things from other languages and incorporate them as we will. ATM machine makes less sense. I'm from Canada. We call it a bank machine. So there's no repetition there. So I didn't have to worry about ATM that much. But anyway, yes. So I will hopefully be here next week because I think the whole neck thing is getting better. Part of the way you tell if it's getting better is because I didn't even realize, like, I just thought I was having muscle pain, and it's the second time it's fooled me like that, because it's down under my shoulder blade. It's actually where it starts to hurt, but the problem is really in my neck. And this time I started getting numbness and tingling in a finger, and I'm like, oh, that's the nerve. Whatever I've been thinking this is, it's not. It's the nerve. Because as soon as I started doing all the chin tucks and stuff more vigorously than I had been, the finger thing stopped immediately. So what you want, they call it centralization. You want the pain to move back up to wherever the actual vertebrae is that is the problem. So I'm up around the upper back neck area now. So I think it's getting better, and I should be fine for next week. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know. Maybe I'll do one of those before and after things finally. But if you have something you'd like to see me do, feel free to drop me a message here or on the Reaper forums, or I don't know, on my Facebook page, on my webpage. I know I would go with here or the Reaper forums as the most likely places that I will notice, and not the Reaper Discord, which is there for those of you who like Discord. And I'm old and haven't figured it out, so that's not a good place to talk to me. But apart from that, I'll see you next week. I'm sure Quindy's going to find us a raid. She's popping up the link to the Discord, so that if you're a Discord person, you just have to click something and then you'll be there. And I'm sure she'll find us a good raid. She usually gets us something that's hobby related, so we can continue thinking fun hobby thoughts and stuff like that. I know a lot of people like paint along or like to do this when they can't hobby. We're going to be rating Monument Hobbies. Hobbies even in the name. So spread the Reaper love, say hi to them for me, and I'll see you next week. Bye, everybody.